Welcome back to Shawn Thinking Out Loud. I'm Shawn Armstrong. I'm a retired United States Army infantryman, published author, martial arts instructor, and someone who's never understood why stupidity suddenly became respectable when you put it behind a desk, give it a professional lighting, and place the word news in the corner of the screen. Today we're talking about the modern political newsroom. More specifically, we're talking about what I call the emotional fast food newsroom. Because that's what much of political media has become. Fast food. It's quick, it's easy, it's heavily processed. It's designed to trigger an immediate response. It doesn't require much thought. It's produced for mass consumption. And if you live on it long enough, something important inside you stops working correctly. Modern political media is increasingly built around emotional validation instead of verified information. The networks are not primarily trying to make you smarter. They're not trying to build an informed citizenry. They're not trying to teach you how government works, how laws are written, how courts operate, how military decisions get made, how economic policies produce trade-offs, or how complicated social problems develop over decades. That would require time, context, definitions, evidence, history, and perhaps worst of all, it would require the audience to pay attention for longer than the average housefly inspecting a sandwich. Political media has found a more profitable model. Keep the viewer angry, keep the viewer frightened, keep the viewer loyal, keep the viewer convinced that his political enemies are dangerous, stupid, evil, or all three. Then keep him staring at the screen long enough to watch another commercial for medication, insurance, reverse mortgages, or some miracle product designed to fix a problem he didn't know he had until the advertisement kindly gave him anxiety about it. That's the business model. Fear, anger, validation, commercial break, repeat until democracy develops chest pains. Now, before somebody starts typing with one finger and heavy breathing, this isn't limited to one political side. I have conservative views. I'm not going to hide that. I have written books criticizing progressivism, identity politics, socialism, political tribalism, administrative government, and the destruction of common citizenship. But being conservative doesn't require me to pretend conservative media is pure. It's not. There are conservative outlets that manipulate. There are liberal outlets that manipulate. There are populist outlets that manipulate. There are independent creators who begin by criticizing corporate media, build an audience, and then discover that outrage pays better than honesty. They become the same damn thing with cheaper lighting. The political direction changes. The business model doesn't. Tell the audience what it already wants to hear. Feed the audience a villain. Confirm that the audience is morally superior. Avoid details that complicate the story. Repeat the most emotionally effective claim. Bring on 3 guests who already agree. Call the shouting a discussion. Then move to commercial. That's not journalism. That's audience management. And audience management works because people like being validated. They like being told their anger is justified. They like being told they're the informed ones. They like being told the other side is brainwashed. They like hearing a television host repeat the same arguments they posted online 12 minutes earlier. It feels good. It gives the viewer a little emotional reward. The screen tells him, you were right. Their enemies are terrible. Your side is fighting for goodness. You don't need to examine anything further. Stay tuned. The last part is important. Stay tuned. Because the purpose of the emotional fast food newsroom isn't to complete your understanding. It's to prevent completion. A completed thought might allow you to turn off the television. A resolved question might let you put down the phone. A balanced explanation might reduce your anger. And calm people are terrible customers for outrage media. Calm people ask questions. Calm people compare sources. Calm people notice when a headline doesn't match the article. Calm people sometimes say, I don't know enough about this yet. That sentence is poison to the modern political content machine. The machine requires instant certainty. Something happens. Within minutes, everybody must have an opinion. Nobody has read the report. Nobody has seen the complete video. Nobody understands the law. Nobody knows what happened before the 10-second clip started, but the nation is already separated into two camps, written its slogans, chosen its heroes, condemned its villains, and begun screaming at strangers. The facts arrive 3 days later and find the building already on fire. That's what we're examining today. Segment 1 is news designed for the dumbest viewer. We're going to look at how complicated subjects are stripped of context and rebuilt as emotional triggers. Segment 2 is validation replaced information. We're going to talk about the uncomfortable fact that many viewers don't actually want information. They want permission to keep believing what they already believe. Segment 3 is the audience created this monster, because the networks wouldn't keep producing partisan sludge if people stopped rewarding it with clicks, subscriptions, donations, and attention. Segment 4 is go Google it, is not evidence. I'm going to use a recent exchange I had with a commenter named John73John to explain what happened to the burden of proof. Apparently, asking somebody to support a list of claims is now considered a dirty trick. Evidence has become an unreasonable demand. Google has become a substitute for argument, and repeating something confidently has become the intellectual equivalent of filing an affidavit. Finally, segment 5 is you're responsible for what you believe, because the news can mislead you, politicians can lie to you, commentators can manipulate you, algorithms can feed you garbage, but at some point, you're responsible for what comes out of your own mouth. If you repeat a claim, you own it. The news said it isn't a defense. That's an excuse for adults who apparently require intellectual training wheels. This episode isn't about demanding that everyone agree with me. You don't have to agree with me. You should be able to explain why you disagree. You should be able to identify your evidence. You should be able to separate a fact from an interpretation. You should be able to admit when a claim hasn't been proven. And you should be able to correct yourself without acting like your entire bloodline has been dishonored. That's the standard. It's not complicated. It's merely difficult because human beings become emotionally attached to opinions faster than they become emotionally attached to some family members. The emotionally fast food newsroom survives because too many people have confused information with affirmation. They think being informed means hearing their side described favorably. They think bias exists only when the other side benefits. They think evidence is whatever supports their position. They think skepticism means doubting the opposition while swallowing every claim made by their own team like a pelican eating a fish at a tourist dock. That's not skepticism, that's selective gullibility. Today, we're going to pull the machine apart. Not because I believe the media can be made perfect. It can't. Humans work there. That ruined perfection before the first editorial meeting. But we can demand better standards. We can recognize manipulation. We can stop rewarding emotional garbage. And we can take responsibility for our own beliefs. Because a free press can't protect a free society if the public only wants professionally produced confirmation of its own prejudices. Let's get into it. Dismantling the Republic is a blunt political critique, which Shawn Armstrong sees as America's descent into tribalism. This book takes aim at elite influence, fractured citizenship, border confusion, middle-class decline, and the weakening of the constitutional order. At the center of this book is a hard question. How does a republic come apart? Armstrong's answer is that elite political and cultural forces have pushed Americans away from shared citizenship and toward tribal thinking, mistrust, and fracture. Across 7 chapters, Armstrong tackles a string of linked problems: citizenship, middle-class instability, borders and sovereignty, tribal politics, unaccountable power, questions about the Constitution, and the pressure of globalism and the so-called Great Reset. The chapter material is pointed. Armstrong argues that citizenship has been diluted. The middle class has been weakened, identity politics has displaced civic unity, and unelected or unaccountable power has expanded where it shouldn't. The book is meant to provoke argument, not hide from it. This is for readers who want a direct political critique. If you care about citizenship, sovereignty, democracy, and whether America can still function as a republic instead of a patchwork of political tribes, this book is aimed right at you. Written by Shawn Armstrong, this book carries a plain-spoken tone shaped by a working-class background and a long military career. That mix gives the argument a grounded edge. It reads like somebody trying to say something clear, not somebody hiding behind fashionable language. If you want a short, direct political critique about tribalism, citizenship, and the future of the American Republic, get the book. Scan the QR code and pick up Dismantling the Republic on Amazon, written by Shawn Armstrong. Available now. Let's start with the basic problem. Most serious public issues are complicated. Immigration is complicated. War is complicated. Tax policy is complicated. Healthcare is complicated. Trade is complicated. Criminal justice is complicated. Constitutional law is complicated. Race relations are complicated. Energy policy is complicated. Public education is complicated. Even something that appears simple usually becomes more complicated once you ask basic questions. What happened? When did it happen? What happened before that? Which law applies? Who has authority? What evidence exists? What evidence is missing? What do the terms mean? What are the likely consequences? Who benefits? Who pays? What alternatives are available? How certain are we? Those are adult questions. They're also terrible television. Television prefers clarity, not truthful clarity, emotional clarity. The hero, the villain, the victim, the threat, the crisis, the outrage, the ticking clock, the dramatic music, the phrase breaking news stamped across something that's been happening for 6 hours and will be discussed for another 3 days. Cable news discovered long ago that complicated explanations cause viewers to change the channel. So the modern newsroom often takes a difficult subject and reduces it to a few emotional instructions. Be afraid of this. Be angry at him. Feel sorry for her. Trust us. Despise them. Stay tuned. That's the emotional recipe. It works because human beings process stories more easily than systems. A system requires thought. A story gives you characters. A policy dispute about border enforcement requires discussion of statutes, executive authority, federal agencies, state cooperation, court decisions, asylum procedures, detention capacity, labor markets, public spending, crime, humanitarian concerns, and citizenship. That sounds exhausting. A network can simplify it. One side shows a crying child, the other side shows a violent criminal. Now the audience knows how to feel. The first audience says enforcement is cruelty. The second audience says immigration is invasion. Both images can represent real parts of the issue. Neither image explains the issue. But explanation isn't the product. Emotional alignment is the product. The same method works with war. War involves national interests, alliances, logistics, geography, weapons, intelligence, deterrence, history, domestic politics, enemy capabilities, escalation risk, and the limits of military force. That's a lot to understand. So political media gives you a monster and a victim. Depending on the network, the American president is either a coward, a warmonger, a genius, a puppet, a dictator, or a man courageously defending freedom from the air-conditioned comfort of a studio in New York. The same military action becomes strength on one network and madness on another. The facts of the action haven't changed, the emotional packaging has. Economic news follows the same model. Inflation has multiple causes. Government spending can affect it. Monetary policy can affect it. Energy prices can affect it. Supply disruptions can affect it. Labor costs can affect it. Housing shortages can affect it. International conflict can affect it. Consumer demand can affect it. The timing of those effects matters, but the explanation requires patience and a whiteboard. Television has 12 seconds and a graphic. So your preferred politician either caused every increase in the price of eggs or courageously prevented the eggs from becoming even more expensive. Nobody knows how poultry markets work. Nobody wants to know. But the audience has received its approved emotion. Mission accomplished. This is what I meant when I said mainstream media caters to the dumbest of the herd. I wasn't saying every viewer is stupid. I was saying the product is often designed around the lowest level of attention and understanding the producer believes will keep the largest audience engaged. That distinction matters. You can be intelligent and still consume stupid media. You can be educated and still enjoy being emotionally manipulated. You can have multiple degrees and still lose your mind when a headline confirms your political prejudices. Credentials don't vaccinate people against tribal thinking. Sometimes they merely give tribal thinking a larger vocabulary. The dumbed-down product is built around several predictable methods. First, remove context. Context is dangerous because context complicates moral certainty. A 10-second video may look horrifying. The 30 seconds before it may change the interpretation. A quotation may sound outrageous. The paragraph surrounding it may reveal that the speaker was describing an opponent's position, making a joke, answering a hypothetical question, or speaking about something completely different. A statistic may sound devastating. The denominator may make it ordinary. The selected time period may hide a larger trend. The category may have changed. The number may be technically correct and still produce a false impression. That's why context matters. And that's why emotional media often avoids it. Second, eliminate definitions. Political arguments collapse because people use the same words to mean different things. Fascism, socialism, democracy, insurrection, coup, racism, violence, murder, ban, censorship, rights, due process. Nobody defines anything. They just throw the words like rocks. A policy becomes fascist because somebody dislikes it. A book becomes banned because one school district removed it from the one grade level. A person becomes censored because a private platform stopped carrying his account. A protest becomes peaceful because most of the crowd didn't personally set anything on fire. A riot becomes patriotic because the rioters voted correctly. The words stretch until they mean whatever the speaker needs at the moment. Then the audience fights over labels instead of facts. Third, erase the timeline. Timelines are brutal because they reveal cause and effect. They reveal what happened first. They reveal who changed positions. They reveal whether a supposed response began before the event it allegedly responded to. They reveal whether a politician inherited a policy, expanded it, reversed it, or merely renamed it. They reveal whether the media ignored a story until it became useful. Without a timeline, every event can be presented as a sudden crisis caused entirely by the current villain. History begins this morning. The audience is invited to forget yesterday. And tomorrow, the network will hope nobody remembers today. Fourth, replace evidence with representative images. One photograph becomes an entire policy. One criminal becomes an entire population. One victim becomes proof of an entire system. One racist becomes representative of millions of voters. One lunatic holding a sign becomes the face of a movement. One outlier becomes the norm. This is emotionally effective because people remember faces. They don't remember tables. They remember a crying mother. They don't remember the legal standard. They remember fire. They don't remember the sequence of events. And once an image becomes emotionally associated with a political claim, correcting the claim becomes extremely difficult. The emotion has already been installed. The facts arrive later, like maintenance workers trying to repair a building while the tenants are still throwing furniture through the windows. Fifth, select the most dramatic language available. A disagreement becomes a clash. A policy change becomes an assault. A procedural vote becomes a constitutional crisis. A legal challenge becomes an attack on democracy. A court ruling becomes the end of freedom. A speech becomes dangerous. A proposal becomes terrifying. A bureaucratic delay becomes chaos. Everything is historic. Everything is unprecedented. Everything threatens the republic. Everything requires you to keep watching after the commercial. Real life is rarely that clean. Most government action is a mixture of good intentions, bad incentives, legal constraints, bureaucratic incompetence, political calculation, and human error. That's less satisfying than a villain. Nobody wants to hear that a problem resulted from 12 agencies following conflicting rules written by committees over 30 years. That doesn't fit on a chyron. It also makes it difficult to know whom to hate. So the newsroom finds a face, usually a politician, sometimes a corporation, sometimes a racial group, sometimes immigrants, sometimes rural voters, sometimes billionaires, sometimes poor people, sometimes foreign governments, sometimes the media, which is amusing when said by a host currently sitting inside a television studio. The system disappears. The villain appears. The audience receives its instructions. The result is a public that knows the emotional position it's supposed to hold, but can't explain the issue. Ask somebody what he thinks about a policy, and he'll speak with tremendous confidence. Ask him what the policy actually says, and he starts making noises usually associated with a lawnmower refusing to start. He knows it's bad. He knows who supports it. He knows which side he's on. He knows the approved adjectives. He doesn't know the contents. That's emotional fast food. It gives you the sensation of knowing without the burden of knowledge. This becomes obvious in online discussions. People arrive carrying the headline. They haven't read the article. They haven't watched the complete interview. They haven't opened the source. They haven't read the court decision. They haven't examined the data. But they're angry. And apparently anger now counts as preparation. You challenge the claim, they respond with another slogan. You ask for evidence, they provide a meme. You point out that the meme contains 15 different claims, they prove one claim and announce victory over the other 14. Then they accuse you of moving the goalposts because you've committed the unspeakable act of remembering what the original meme said. The newsroom prepared them for this. It trained them to treat a cluster of emotionally compatible claims as one moral truth. If one allegation sounds plausible, all the others become plausible. If a politician is bad, every negative claim about him becomes believable. If a group is oppressed, every accusation against the opposing group becomes credible. If a network has labeled a person dangerous, evidence becomes optional. The narrative carries the claim. The emotional category replaces verification. A serious newsroom would slow the audience down. It would say, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's the source. Here's the relevant law. Here's the strongest argument on each side. Here's where the evidence conflicts. Here's what changed today. Here's what hasn't been established. Here's our correction from yesterday. That would be useful. It would also be less entertaining. And modern political media has increasingly confused public usefulness with audience retention. The network often defends themselves by saying they're giving viewers what viewers want. That may be true. A fast food restaurant also gives customers what they want. That doesn't turn a bucket of grease into a vegetable. Demand explains the product. It doesn't justify the product. News designed for the dumbest viewer eventually creates dumber political habits in everyone who consumes it. It teaches people to expect simple explanations. It teaches them to distrust complexity. It teaches them that uncertainty is weakness. It teaches them that facts should produce the correct emotion. It teaches them that disagreement signals moral failure. And it teaches them that being informed means being emotionally prepared to attack the other side. That's not information, that's conditioning.
Are you fucking getting it yet?
The next problem is more personal. It's also more uncomfortable. The media sells emotional validation because people buy emotional validation. A lot of viewers don't want their beliefs examined. They want their beliefs blessed. They want a television personality with professional makeup, expensive teeth, and a dramatic voice to tell them that their anger is righteous. They want to hear, "You're correct. Your fear is reasonable. Your political enemies are dangerous. Your side is decent. You've been betrayed. You're one of the informed people. Keep watching." That experience feels like information because facts are usually mixed into it. The best propaganda doesn't consist entirely of lies. It consists of selected facts arranged to produce a desired conclusion. A network may show real video. It may cite a real number. It may quote a real statement. But selection matters. Placement matters. Repetition matters. Omission matters. Tone matters. The guest list matters. The questions matter. The questions that never get asked matter even more. Imagine two networks covering the same event. Network 1 begins with the most sympathetic image available. It interviews the grieving family. It uses language about fear, pain, and injustice. It brings on an advocate who describes the event as part of a larger pattern. The host nods seriously. Nobody challenges the pattern. Network 2 begins with the most threatening image available. It interviews a law enforcement official. It uses language about disorder, danger, and national decline. It brings on a former prosecutor who describes the event as proof of institutional failure. The host nods seriously. Nobody challenges the generalization. Both networks may show true things. Both networks may leave the audience with a distorted understanding because the facts were selected to validate the audience's emotional identity. This is why people choose networks the way they choose churches. They're not always looking for information. They're looking for a moral community. They want a familiar language, familiar enemies, familiar rituals, familiar conclusions. They want to sit among the congregation and hear that the world makes sense. Our side is good. Their side is evil. Our failures are mistakes. Their failures reveal character. Our lies are unfortunate exaggerations. Their lies are threats to democracy. Our political violence is frustration. Their political violence is terrorism. Our corruption is complicated. Their corruption is obvious. Our old politician is experienced. Their old politician is senile. Our billionaire is a successful businessman. Their billionaire is an oligarch. It's the same sermon every night with different names in the bulletin. Validation replaces information when the audience judges a report by how well it matches the audience's identity. The question is no longer, is this true? The question becomes, does this sound like something our side believes? That's a much lower standard. Once a claim fits the worldview, the audience stops demanding evidence. The claim feels true. It confirms what the audience already suspects. And feelings have become expert witnesses in the court of public opinion. People say things like, I knew they were doing that. This is exactly what I've been saying. It doesn't surprise me. Everybody knows this. Of course the media won't report it. Notice what's missing? Evidence. The claim is treated as credible because it fits a prior emotional expectation. That's confirmation bias with a cable subscription. Political personalities understand this. They know their audience. They know which phrases trigger applause. They know which enemies increase engagement. They know when to act shocked. They know when to look disgusted. They know when to lower their voice and announce that what they're about to tell you is deeply disturbing. Then they tell you exactly what you expected them to say. The viewer experiences surprise and confirmation at the same time. It's a neat trick. Like a magician pulling your own opinion out of a hat and charging you for the ticket. The host doesn't have to order the audience to hate anyone. He only has to arrange the story. Show the worst clip. Repeat the most inflammatory statement. Choose the least sympathetic photograph. Invite the most extreme opponent. Present that person as representative. Ask loaded questions. Use moral language. Then allow the audience to reach the conclusion it was guided toward from the beginning. The viewer feels independent because nobody explicitly told him what to think. He merely followed a hallway in which every door had been locked. This is where political media becomes therapy. Bad therapy. The kind where the therapist tells you that every conflict is somebody else's fault and your worst habits are actually signs of courage. A responsible therapist may challenge you. A political host can't risk that. Challenge creates discomfort. Discomfort creates channel changes. So the host validates. Your anger is justified. Your resentment is insight. Your fear is awareness. Your obsession is vigilance. Your refusal to consider opposing evidence is moral clarity. Your political tribe is your support system. Come back tomorrow. The audience receives emotional relief. That relief becomes addictive. People begin their day by checking which new event proves they were right about the world. They scroll until they find outrage. They send it to friends. The friends respond with agreement. The group reinforces the emotion. By lunchtime, everyone is furious about something none of them has examined. This is called being politically engaged, apparently. The validation model also explains why corrections rarely work. A correction provides information. The original false claim provided identity and emotion. Those are not equal products. Suppose a viral claim says a politician committed some outrageous act. The claim spreads because it confirms what millions already believed about him. People share it. They joke about it. They use it as proof of his depravity. 3 days later, the claim is corrected. The correction contains fewer emotional rewards. It asks people to surrender certainty. It threatens group status. It may require deleting a post. It may require admitting that the hated politician didn't commit that particular act. So the correction spreads slowly. Some people never see it. Some see it and reject it. Some modify the claim. They say, maybe that specific detail was wrong, but it sounds like something he would do. That sentence should be printed on the tombstone of honest public discussion. The claim no longer needs to be true. It only needs to represent a deeper emotional truth. That's how fiction becomes evidence. The story expresses what the audience believes about the person. Therefore, the factual accuracy becomes secondary. This is why satire, rumor, edited clips, anonymous claims, and fabricated quotations circulate so easily. They feel right, and in emotional media, feeling right often outranks being right. Validation also changes how people process opposing information. When a network has spent years telling viewers that another outlet is dishonest, information from that outlet can be rejected automatically. Sometimes rejection is justified. News organizations make mistakes. They display bias. They manipulate. But total dismissal creates a closed system. Inside the closed system, every outside challenge becomes proof that the outsiders are corrupt. Every correction becomes censorship. Every contradiction becomes part of the conspiracy. Every source that agrees is credible. Every source that disagrees is compromised. The belief protects itself. That structure is common in cults, ideological movements, conspiracy communities, and dysfunctional relationships. It's also common in partisan media audiences. The viewer says, "I do my own research." What he often means is, "I search until I find somebody who agrees with me." That's not research. That's shopping. He's not testing a belief. He's selecting a product. Actual research can hurt. You may discover that your side lied. You may discover that the politician you supported acted dishonestly. You may discover that the network you trusted omitted important context. You may discover that an opponent made a valid point. You may discover that the evidence is inconclusive. You may discover that you were wrong. This is why most people don't enjoy actual research. It has the rude habit of producing answers they didn't order. Emotional validation avoids that risk. It delivers the answer first. The supporting material is selected afterward. The audience knows the destination. The host supplies transportation. Everybody arrives together and congratulates themselves for the journey. This process damages public trust because each political group lives inside a different emotional reality. One group watches coverage showing chaos, criminality, institutional weakness, national humiliation, and cultural decay. Another group watches coverage showing oppression, authoritarianism, discrimination, corporate greed, and threats to democracy. Real elements may exist in both pictures, but each side receives a curated world. Then the citizens meet online and can't understand how the other side could be so stupid. They're not arguing from different interpretations of the same evidence. They're often arguing from different collections of evidence, different omissions, different emotional priorities, different villains, different realities. The media then reports the country as polarized. That's a little like an arsonist reporting a sudden rise in neighborhood fires. Technically accurate, somewhat incomplete. The worst part is that validation often feels respectful. A host who challenges his audience may appear arrogant. A host who confirms the audience appears honest. But respect isn't telling people whatever keeps them comfortable. Respect means treating them as adults capable of handling complexity. It means saying, your side may be wrong here. This claim isn't supported. That video lacks context. The evidence is mixed. The politician you support contradicted himself. The person you dislike may have a point. We don't know yet. Those statements should be ordinary. Instead, they sound radical. Because modern political media often treats the audience like an insecure child who must be protected from any information that could damage his partisan self-esteem. Information asks what's true. Validation asks what the audience needs to hear to remain emotionally loyal. Once validation replaces information, the newsroom stops serving the public. It serves the relationship between the brand and the audience. The viewers are customers. The hosts are trusted personalities. The political narrative is the subscription, and truth is welcome only when it doesn't threaten customer retention. This is The Unmaking of the American Citizen by Shawn Armstrong. It's a political and cultural diagnosis of what's happened to the American idea of citizenship over the last century. Shawn Armstrong argues that the country changed regimes without changing its constitution, moving from progressivism to the New Deal order, then to neoliberalism, identity politics, and the Great Awakening. If you want a serious critique with a clear conservative argument behind it, this book gets straight to work. The core argument is simple and brutal. America kept the shell of the Constitution, but changed the way the regime operates. Instead of equal citizenship, we got expanding bureaucracy, cultural management, and institutions that classify people by identity groups. Shawn Armstrong shows how the promise of fairness and freedom turned into something else. Hollowed out communities, growing despair, and a permanent fight between approved victims and approved villains. The book maps the road clearly. First comes progressivism and the New Deal order, where centralized management becomes normal. Then comes neoliberalism, which uses global markets, free trade, and permanent war to reshape the country and weaken the middle class. Then comes identity politics and the Great Awakening, where equal citizenship gets replaced by a moral hierarchy of victim and oppressor. Shawn Armstrong treats this as a regime story, not random chaos. This book is not just a complaint. It makes a case for conservative renewal. Shawn Armstrong argues for recovering equal citizenship under the law, relearning Republican virtue, reviving Christian and natural law traditions, and building local institutions that can outlast failing national systems. He also tells conservatives to stop apologizing for who they are and to start defending the rights and duties of citizenship without flinching. This book is aimed at readers who feel the ground shifted beneath the country and want more than bumper sticker politics. It's for conservatives, Christians, independents, and anybody else who's tired of being handled like a demographic category. If you want a readable explanation of how we got here and a conservative answer that goes beyond complaining, this book fits. Shawn Armstrong is a retired U.S. Army veteran, lifelong student of history, and prolific author whose work spans military affairs, politics, economics, religion, martial arts, American history, and the unexplained. Drawing on more than 2 decades of military service and a lifetime of study, Armstrong writes with clarity, discipline, and practical judgment. His books form a lasting record of the knowledge he has earned through experience, research, and reflection, created to inform readers, challenge assumptions, and pass something worthwhile to the next generation. If you want to understand how America moved from citizenship to bureaucratic management and identity politics, scan the QR code or use the Amazon link and grab The Unmaking of the American Citizen. This is a serious political book with a clear conservative answer. Shawn Armstrong has put the work on the page. Now you can put it in your hands. People love blaming the media. It's convenient. The media is dishonest. The media is corrupt. The media manipulates. The media divides the country. All of these accusations can contain truth. But there's another part of the story. The audience rewards it. Networks wouldn't keep producing partisan sludge if partisan sludge didn't produce ratings. Websites wouldn't write manipulative headlines if people stopped clicking them. Creators wouldn't manufacture daily outrage if outrage stopped producing views, donations, subscriptions, and merchandise sales. Politicians wouldn't make every speech sound like the last battle for civilization if frightened supporters stopped opening their wallets. The media produces the product. The audience creates the market. Humanity once again discovers a system built for its own behavior and asks who could possibly have done this. The relationship between the media and the audience is not one-directional. The media shapes the audience. The audience shapes the media. The network studies what gets attention. It tracks which stories produce engagement. It knows when viewers change the channel. It knows which guests bring an audience. It knows which words increase clicks. It knows which politicians keep people watching. It knows which fears drive subscriptions. Then it produces more of that, more of what worked. The audience clicks again. The cycle tightens. This isn't a secret conspiracy. It's a business incentive. Political content competes for attention. Attention is limited. Outrage captures attention. Fear captures attention. Conflict captures attention. Humiliation captures attention. Nuance usually doesn't. A headline saying, "Complicated policy dispute involves legitimate concerns and uncertain trade-offs," won't travel far. A headline saying, "They're destroying America," will run laps around it. The second headline doesn't need to explain who they are. The audience already knows. They means the people you dislike. The pronoun comes preloaded. The audience claims to hate sensationalism while rewarding sensationalism. People complain that the news is too negative. Then they ignore positive stories. They complain that journalism lacks depth. Then they abandon an article after 3 paragraphs. They complain that headlines are misleading. Then they share headlines without reading the article. They complain that networks are partisan. Then they choose the network that most consistently flatters their own side. They demand better media the way people demand healthier food while standing in line for fried cheese. That doesn't excuse the producer. Journalists and editors have professional responsibilities. They should resist the worst incentives. They should verify claims. They should correct errors. They should distinguish reporting from commentary. They should avoid presenting speculation as fact. They should resist pressure from owners, advertisers, political campaigns, activists, and audiences. That's the job. But the audience also has responsibilities. The viewer can't spend 10 years rewarding rage and then act betrayed when the network becomes a rage factory. Consider the click. A click looks trivial. It's not. A click is a vote. It tells the system, more of this. When you click a sensational headline, you reward the headline. When you share a claim you haven't verified, you reward the claim. When you watch a host because he makes you furious, you reward the host. When you spend 40 minutes hate watching an opposing commentator, the platform doesn't record moral resistance. It records 40 minutes. The algorithm isn't impressed by your principles. It sees engagement. You may think you're studying the enemy. The platform thinks you're a satisfied customer. This is why outrage media doesn't care whether attention is positive. Love and hate both watch advertisements. Admiration and disgust both increase view counts. A creator can build an entire career from people who claim to despise him but never miss an episode. The critics become unpaid marketing staff. They clip his statements. They circulate his name. They argue in his comments. They increase his reach. Then they complain that he has influence. Some people fight fires by pouring gasoline on him and posting the video for awareness. The donation model creates another incentive. Political creators tell audiences that the situation is urgent. The country is collapsing. The enemy is advancing. The establishment is silencing us. The campaign desperately needs support. The independent newsroom is under attack. Freedom depends on your monthly membership. There's always a crisis, because resolved crisis doesn't generate recurring donations. The audience becomes emotionally invested. Money reinforces identity. Once someone donates, subscribes, buys merchandise, and spends hundreds of hours watching a personality, admitting that the personality is dishonest becomes costly. It's no longer a factual correction. It's an admission that the viewer invested in garbage. People resist that. They double down. This is called sunk cost problem. The more people invest in a belief, the harder it becomes to leave. They've defended it publicly. They've insulted people over it. They've damaged relationships over it. They've purchased hats, shirts, flags, memberships, and commemorative coffee mugs. They've made the position part of their identity. Then contradictory evidence appears. Now changing their minds would require more than accepting a new fact. It would require rebuilding part of themselves. So they attack the evidence. Networks understand loyalty. They build brands around trust. Not trust in a process. Trust in personalities. The audience knows the host. The host speaks directly into the camera. The host shares personal stories. The host appears angry on the audience's behalf. The host becomes familiar. Being familiar to the viewer feels like credibility. The viewer thinks, he wouldn't lie to me. The viewer's never met him. The host would step over the viewer in an airport without noticing. But every evening, the relationship resumes. This parasocial loyalty allows political commentators to survive repeated failures. Predictions fail. The audience stays. Claims collapse. The audience stays. Scandals emerge. The audience stays. Contradictions become obvious. The audience explains them away. Because the host provides more than information. He provides belonging, and belonging is difficult to fact-check. The audience also pressures networks to become more extreme. Suppose a network presents a complicated story honestly. Part of the audience becomes angry. They accuse the network of betrayal. They say the network is moving toward the enemy. They threaten to cancel subscriptions. They migrate to a more partisan outlet. The original network learns a lesson. Nuance loses customers. The competing outlet gains them. The entire market shifts towards stronger validation. This is how ideological audiences discipline media companies. The audience demands loyalty. The network supplies it. Then everybody blames the network for polarization. You see this whenever a trusted outlet reports something inconvenient about its own political side. The audience doesn't thank the outlet for independence. It attacks the outlet. People say, "You've changed. You're compromised. You're helping the enemy. I used to trust you." The standard is clear. Trust means agreement. Independence means betrayal. The network has to choose between journalism and audience retention. Too often, retention wins. That's not new. Newspapers historically had political identities. Partisan pamphlets were vicious. Political movements have always used media. What's changed is speed, scale, personalization, and measurement. Modern platforms know what keeps each user engaged. They can deliver personalized outrage continuously. The old newspaper published one front page. The modern feed publishes a different emotional universe for every user. One person receives stories about crime. Another receives stories about racism. Another receives stories about government corruption. Another receives stories about corporate abuse. Another receives stories about war. Another receives stories about immigration. Each person begins believing his feed represents the most important things happening in the world. It may represent only the things most likely to keep that particular person scrolling. The result isn't simply bias, it's emotional enclosure. The user lives inside a customized environment built from his previous reactions. Every click trains the system. The system then trains the user. The user becomes more predictable. The content becomes more targeted. The emotions become more intense. This is profitable. It's also terrible preparation for citizenship. Citizens need shared facts. Algorithms produce private realities. Citizens need patience. Platforms reward immediacy. Citizens need to hear disagreement. Feeds reduce exposure to disagreement or present disagreement in its most offensive form. Citizens need humility. Political brands sell certainty. Citizens need community. Platforms sell tribal identity. And again, the audience participates. You train the feed. You choose whom to follow. You decide what to share. You decide whether to open an article. You decide whether to verify a claim. You decide whether to reward rage. The algorithm is powerful. It's not supernatural. It can't force you to repost nonsense. It can't make you repeat a claim you haven't checked. It can't physically prevent you from reading a source that challenges your position. At some point, personal responsibility enters the room, removes its coat, and wonders why everyone's been avoiding eye contact. The solution isn't to eliminate political media. That's impossible and undesirable. The solution is to change the incentives we control. Stop clicking obvious rage bait. Stop sharing claims based on headlines. Stop rewarding commentators who never correct themselves. Stop treating every political development as entertainment. Stop hate-watching people you claim should have no platform. Stop giving money to personalities who keep you permanently terrified. Stop confusing emotional intensity with importance. Reward depth. Reward corrections. Reward primary sources. Reward people who distinguish what they know from what they suspect. Reward commentators willing to criticize their own side. Reward people who admit uncertainty. Reward discussions where disagreement doesn't immediately collapse into accusations of evil. This won't transform the entire system overnight. Nothing transforms an entire society overnight except disaster, and even then, humans usually learn the wrong lesson. But incentives matter. Emotional fast food newsroom exists because emotional fast food sells. The media created the menu. The audience keeps ordering. And until the audience develops better political eating habits, the kitchen will continue serving grease with a flag stuck in it. Now we get to one of my favorite modern intellectual failures. Go Google it. That phrase is usually delivered by someone who's made a claim, been asked to support it, and suddenly discovered that evidence is a burden best outsourced to people questioning him. The exchange goes something like this. Person 1 makes a list of allegations. Person 2 asks for evidence. Person 1 says, it's all public record. Person 2 asks for a source. Person 1 says, go Google it. That's not an argument. That's an assignment from a person who arrived unprepared. I recently had an exchange with a commenter named John73John. The original issue involved a political meme containing a list of claims. I challenged the evidentiary standard. The basic point was simple. A list of claims doesn't become proven because one item on the list is supported. If a meme contains 10, 20, or 30 allegations, each allegation carries its own burden. Proving one item doesn't automatically authenticate the rest. One correct answer on a 50-question test doesn't produce a perfect score. Apparently, this concept caused emotional injuries. John argued that go Google it is what people say when evidence is already a matter of public record, has been widely reported, has been verified by reputable journalists, and is denied only by unreasonable people. He selected one example from the list and argued that the example had been proven. Then he accused me of moving the goalpost when I pointed out that proving one claim didn't prove the remaining claims. No, that's not moving the goalposts, that's counting. The meme made multiple claims. The burden applies to multiple claims. You don't get to bring one receipt for a shopping cart full of groceries and accuse the cashier of moving the goalpost when she asks about everything else. This exchange demonstrates how emotional media damages reasoning. People stop treating claims as individual propositions. They treat them as parts of a moral narrative. The narrative is, this political figure is bad. Therefore, negative claims about him are collectively credible. If one claim is proven, the narrative feels confirmed. Once the narrative is confirmed, the remaining claims inherit credibility. That's not logic. That's guilt by emotional association. Let's establish the burden of proof clearly. The person making a claim carries the initial responsibility to support it. That doesn't mean every casual statement needs a research paper. If I say it's raining while both of us are standing in the rain, demanding satellite data would be ridiculous. If I say a public official committed a felony, took a bribe, assaulted someone, falsified a record, ordered an illegal act, or caused a specific public disaster, evidence is required. The seriousness of the allegation affects the level of support expected. Extraordinary claims require strong evidence. Specific claims require specific evidence. Lists require more than vibes. The burden of proof doesn't mean the claim is false until proven. It means the claim hasn't been established until supported. That distinction matters. Suppose someone says a politician accepted illegal money. I ask for evidence. The person fails to provide it. I'm not automatically proving the politician innocent. I'm showing that the accusation hasn't been demonstrated. Unknown is not the same as false. Unproven is not the same as disproven. But unproven also doesn't mean you get to repeat the allegation as fact. That's the part people struggle with. Go Google it fails for several reasons. First, search results aren't evidence. A search engine returns material based on relevance, popularity, personalization, search terms, advertising, and other ranking factors. It may return excellent sources. It may also return garbage. It may return reports repeating the same original allegation. It may return commentary describing controversy without verifying the underlying facts. It may return fact checks. It may return propaganda. The existence of search results proves that people have discussed the claim. It doesn't prove the claim. Second, the wording of the search changes the result. Search evidence politician committed crime. You may receive accusatory material. Search false allegations against politician. You may receive defensive material. Search engines respond to framing. A person can create the appearance of research by choosing language designed to produce the desired conclusion. Then he points to the results and says the truth is obvious. He placed an order and is impressed that the kitchen delivered his meal. Third, repetition doesn't create independent confirmation. Suppose one anonymous allegation appears in a report. 10 websites repeat the report. 20 commentators discuss it. 50 social media accounts summarize the discussion. A search now produces hundreds of results. But the entire structure may rest on one unsupported source. That's not hundreds of confirmations. That's one claim wearing a crowd. Independent confirmation requires independent evidence. Different reporters citing the same document may add analysis, but they're still relying on the same underlying source. Different outlets repeating the same wire report are not separate investigations. Different people quoting the same anonymous official are not separate witnesses. You have to trace the claim backward. Where did it begin? What's the original source? Does the source have first-hand knowledge? Is the document authentic? Is the quotation complete? Does the evidence support the specific allegation? Those questions separate research from repetition. Fourth, familiarity creates an illusion of truth. Psychologists describe a general phenomenon in which repeated statements become easier to process and therefore feel more credible. You don't need a laboratory to see it. Political media repeats phrases constantly. Threat to democracy. Most corrupt president. Stolen election. Open border. Weaponized justice. Existential crisis. Fascist. Communist. Dictator. Traitor. After enough repetition, the phrase feels established. The audience remembers hearing it everywhere. That familiarity gets mistaken for proof. People say, everybody knows. Everybody may merely be repeating. Fifth, searchable doesn't mean settled. Many contested claims are searchable. You can find material supporting opposite conclusions. You can find allegations, denials, lawsuits, reports, opinions, and incomplete records. The existence of information online doesn't remove the need to evaluate it. A library contains books that contradict each other. Nobody walks into the library, points at the shelves, and announces that every claim inside has been proven because the books are publicly available. Google is a tool. It's not an oracle. Sixth, go Google it allows the claimant to avoid defining the claim. This matters. Suppose somebody says a politician was convicted of fraud. What exactly does that mean? Civil or criminal? Which jurisdiction? Which statute? Which court? Was the politician personally convicted, or was a company found liable? Was it a trial verdict, plea, settlement, administrative ruling, or media characterization? Did the judgment survive appeal? Details matter, but when the claimant sends you to Google, he avoids committing to details. You search, you find something related, he says, "See?" The claim changes shape to match whatever you discovered. That's moving the goalposts, not asking him to support the original statement. The same trick appears with statistics. Someone says, "Millions of people did this." You ask for the source. He says, "It's been reported everywhere." You find a report saying millions may have been affected by a broader category. He treats that as proof of the narrower claim. The words changed, the category changed, the number survived, and the audience applauds because the emotional conclusion remains intact. Lists make this worse. Political means love lists because lists create volume. A long list feels overwhelming. It creates the impression that wrongdoing is endless. The viewer can't examine every item quickly. The person sharing the meme doesn't expect him to. The purpose isn't careful evaluation. The purpose is accumulated emotional weight. 20 allegations feel stronger than one allegation, even when 19 have no source. When challenged, the defender selects the strongest item. He proves that one. Then he declares the list credible. That's exactly the problem in the John 73 John exchange. He was told to select one item because he hadn't supported the list. He selected one. Fine. That proved, at most, one item. It didn't transform the meme into an academic source. It didn't authenticate every allegation. It didn't transfer the burden to the person asking questions. The original list remained a list of separate claims. This is elementary reasoning. Human beings apparently misplaced it somewhere between the invention of the meme and the collapse of the attention span. John then argued that the post never claimed to be an academic research paper. Nobody required an academic research paper. That's another dodge. When asked for evidence, people pretend the challenger demanded an impossible standard. Nobody asked for footnotes in Chicago style. Nobody requested a dissertation defense. Nobody demanded a panel of Nobel Prize winners. A credible link would help. A court document would help. A complete quotation would help. A report from a named source would help. A clear explanation would help. Go Google it doesn't help. This false choice appears constantly. Either accept the meme or demand an academic paper. Either trust the commentator or conduct a 5-year investigation. Either believe the allegation or defend the accused. No, there's a middle position. I don't know. The evidence provided doesn't establish that. The source supports part of the claim. This item appears accurate, but the rest requires separate verification. That quotation is correct, but the interpretation is debatable. Those are adult answers. They lack emotional fireworks. That's why social media hates them. The burden of proof also protects your own credibility. When you support your claims, people can evaluate them. When you identify your sources, people can check your work. When you distinguish fact from opinion, disagreement becomes clearer. When you correct errors, trust can increase. But if your standard is Google it, you become responsible for every possible result that other person might find. That's a terrible strategy. He may find something that contradicts you. Then what? Do you tell him he used the wrong Google? Do you accuse the algorithm of fascism? Do you announce that the search engine has been compromised by the deep state, the billionaires, foreign agents, or whichever invisible committee is scheduled to ruin your afternoon? A better standard is simple. State the claim clearly. Provide the best evidence available. Explain how the evidence supports the claim. Acknowledge limitations. Respond to contradictory evidence. Correct mistakes. That's how argument works. The burden of proof is not a trick. It's the price of asking other people to believe you. And if you can't pay that price, stop making the purchase. Consent of the governed takes a simple but essential question and treats it with a seriousness it deserves. What makes government legitimate, and why does that still matter today? Shawn Armstrong digs into the Federalist Papers and shows why consent is not some dusty slogan. It's the foundation of self-government. At the center of this book is a basic truth. Government is only legitimate when it rests on the consent of the governed. Armstrong walks the readers through that principle with clarity, using the Federalist Papers to show how the founders understood power, authority, and the limits that keep liberty alive. This is a full collection of essays, not a thin overview. Across 452 pages, Armstrong examines the Federalist Papers through the work of Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, dealing with political philosophy, rights, and the balance of power. The point is not to bury you in jargon. The point is to make the ideas usable. What gives this book teeth is that it doesn't stay in the 18th century. Armstrong connects the principles in the Federalist Papers to modern arguments about power, liberty, and the role of the citizen. If you want to understand today without pretending the past is irrelevant, this book gives you a solid footing. This is for readers who actually want substance: scholars, history buffs, political enthusiasts, and regular citizens who are tired of shallow civics and cheap talking points. If you want to think more clearly about government and your place in it, this book gives you real material to work with. Consent of the Governed is written by Shawn Armstrong, whose background brings a grounded voice to a serious subject. He writes with clarity, keeps the argument moving, and never loses sight of the fact that these ideas matter because people still live under governments that either respect consent or abuse power. If you want a stronger grasp of the principle that makes Republican government legitimate, get the book. Scan the QR code and pick up Consent of the Governed on Amazon. Consent of the Governed by Shawn Armstrong. Serious history, clear argument, and relevance that reaches straight into the present day. We've blamed the networks. We've blamed the hosts. We've blamed the editors. We've blamed the algorithms. We've blamed advertisers. We've blamed politicians. We've blamed activists. We've blamed partisan audiences. Now we arrive at the individual, you. You're responsible for what you believe. You're responsible for what you repeat. You're responsible for the standards you apply. You're responsible for correcting yourself. You're responsible for deciding whether a claim has enough support to leave your mouth and enter the world wearing your name. This doesn't mean you have to personally investigate every event on Earth. Nobody can do that. You rely on other people. You rely on reporters. You rely on experts. You rely on institutions. You rely on witnesses. You rely on documents. Civilization requires distributed knowledge, but reliance isn't surrender. Trust doesn't eliminate judgment, and repeating a claim makes you part of the chain. The news said it isn't a defense. Which news? What exactly did it say? Did the reporter state it as fact? Did a guest allege it? Was it part of a quotation? Was it later corrected? Did you read beyond the headline? Did the source provide evidence? Did other credible sources confirm it? Do you understand the difference between an accusation, indictment, verdict, settlement, and conviction? Do you understand the statistic? Do you know the date? Do you know the context? If the answer is no, then your certainty should decrease. That's not weakness, that's calibration. Confidence should match evidence. Strong evidence supports strong confidence. Limited evidence supports limited confidence. Conflicting evidence supports caution. No evidence supports silence. This isn't complicated. It merely conflicts with the Internet's business model, which rewards people for having immediate, aggressive opinions about subjects they discovered during breakfast. Adults should be able to say, "I heard that, but I haven't verified it. That appears plausible, but I don't know. I was wrong. I overstated the case. The source I used was unreliable. The full video changes the context. The number was accurate, but my interpretation wasn't. I still oppose the person, but this particular allegation is false." Those sentences demonstrate strength. Weak people protect every opinion as if it were a child. Strong people correct the record. Your political side doesn't deserve a lower standard. In fact, you should apply a stricter standard to your own side because your natural bias will pull it in its direction. If you're conservative, examine conservative claims. If you're liberal, examine liberal claims. If you support a politician, scrutinize favorable stories about him. If you hate a politician, scrutinize accusations against him. Hatred lowers skepticism. Admiration lowers skepticism. Both emotions make you easier to manipulate. A simple test helps. Ask yourself, would I accept this evidence if it were used against my side? If the answer is no, your standard may be partisan. Would I consider this source credible if it defended my opponent? Would I dismiss this anonymous allegation if it targeted someone I supported? Would I call this action authoritarian if my preferred president did it? Would I call this protest peaceful if the other party organized it? Would I call this donation corrupt if the money went to my candidate? Would I call this family connection suspicious if the politician's name changed? Those questions expose selective standards, and selective standards are everywhere. People don't always believe false claims because they were tricked. Sometimes they believe them because the claims are useful. A false claim may help win an argument. It may humiliate an opponent. It may strengthen group loyalty. It may justify anger. It may excuse bad behavior. It may increase donations. It may protect a politician. It may damage a politician. The believer has a motive. This is why correction requires character, not merely information. When evidence changes, character determines what happens next. A person with integrity says, "I need to change my position." A partisan says, "The larger point still stands." That phrase often means, "The evidence failed, but I'd like to keep the emotional conclusion." Sometimes the larger point does stand. A single false claim does not necessarily destroy an entire argument, but you must remove the false claim. You can't keep using it because it represents something you feel is generally true. Facts aren't decorative supports. They carry weight. Responsibility also means reading before sharing. This sounds embarrassingly basic. Apparently it's now advanced civic training. Read the article, watch the complete clip, check the date, look for the original source, separate reporting from opinion, notice whether the headline uses words that source itself doesn't use. Notice whether the article says may, could, reportedly, according to, or sources claim. Those words signal uncertainty or attribution. Social media summaries often remove them. Official may have known becomes official knew. Investigators are examining becomes official caught. Critics allege becomes report proves. Possibility becomes fact during the trip from article to meme. Check whether the content is old. Old stories circulate as new events constantly. A photograph from one country appears under a claim about another. A video from years ago is presented as happening today. A quotation from a different controversy gets attached to the current argument. People share first and check later. By the time the correction arrives, the emotional damage is complete. A date takes 3 seconds to examine. 3 seconds is apparently too much to ask during a national emergency involving a Facebook post. Check whether the account is satire. Check whether the image is altered. Check whether the quotation exists. Check whether the clip begins in the middle of a sentence. Check whether the statistic compares equivalent categories. Check whether record high refers to a raw number in a growing population. Check whether percentage change is being confused with percentage points. Check whether a national claim comes from one local incident. Check whether a study demonstrates correlation or causation. You don't need a doctorate. You need habits. Good information habits resemble physical training. You don't suddenly become disciplined during a crisis. You fall back on what you practiced. If your normal habit is sharing first, you'll share false claims during important events. If your normal habit is checking sources, you're more likely to pause. If your normal habit is treating political opponents as evil, you'll believe accusations against them too easily. If your normal habit is intellectual honesty, you'll feel the bias and resist it. This is one reason I keep emphasizing evidence in online arguments. The purpose is not to win every discussion. Some people are unreachable. You can present a document, a video, a court record, a timeline, and a signed confession, and they'll accuse you of changing the subject because reality failed to respect their feelings. The purpose is to maintain your own standard. You can't control whether another person thinks honestly. You can control whether you do. You should also know when to stop. Not every stranger deserves 4 hours of your life. Some people aren't debating. They're performing. They want attention. They want to provoke. They want to move from claim to claim until you become exhausted. They'll never admit error because the interaction isn't about truth. It's about status. You can identify the behavior. Ask for a clear claim. Ask for evidence. Keep the subject narrow. If the person refuses, leave. Your time is a resource. Don't donate it to intellectual panhandlers. Responsibility means distinguishing your own role. You may be a citizen, a voter, a parent, a teacher, a veteran, a student, a creator, a commentator. Each role carries influence. If you have an audience, your responsibility increases. A false claim repeated to 10 people can mislead 10 people. A false claim repeated to 10,000 can build a movement. Creators often hide behind the phrase, "I'm just asking questions." Questions can inform. Questions can also smuggle accusations. Is the mayor secretly taking bribes? Did the candidate fake his medical records? Was the attack staged? The speaker offers no evidence. He merely asks. The audience hears the allegation. If challenged, he retreats. He never made the claim. He was curious. That's cowardice with punctuation. Ask genuine questions. Don't use questions to plant claims you're afraid to defend. If you suspect wrongdoing, explain why. Identify the evidence. State the uncertainty. Don't turn speculation into content and call yourself a researcher. Responsibility also applies to emotional reactions. You can't prevent yourself from feeling anger, fear, disgust, or sympathy, but you can prevent the emotion from becoming your entire analysis. Emotion can signal that something matters. It can't prove what happened. A video may make you angry. Your anger doesn't establish the legal facts. A victim may make you sympathetic. Sympathy doesn't prove every allegation. A politician may disgust you. Disgust doesn't authenticate a meme. An institution may have lied before. Past dishonesty justifies caution. It doesn't prove every current claim false. This is where intellectual maturity begins. You hold emotion and evidence separately. You ask, what am I feeling? What do I know? What do I suspect? What's being claimed? What supports it? What would change my mind? That last question matters. What would change your mind? The answer is nothing. You don't have a conclusion. You have a faith commitment. And political faith commitments are dangerous because politicians aren't gods. Most are barely qualified to manage a group text. The media will continue manipulating. The technology will improve. Artificial intelligence will make fabricated audio, video, images, and documents easier to produce. Political campaigns will use increasingly precise emotional targeting. Foreign governments will exploit division. Domestic activists will exploit division. Businesses will exploit division. Creators will exploit division. The information environment will not become simpler. Your habits must become stronger. You need a personal standard. Mine is direct. What's the claim? What's the evidence? Does the evidence support the claim? What context is missing? Is the same standard being applied to everyone? That won't answer every question. It will eliminate a tremendous amount of bullshit. Don't outsource your entire judgment to a network. Don't outsource it to a political party. Don't outsource it to a favorite creator. Don't outsource it to me. Listen to my argument, check my reasoning, challenge my evidence, agree when the argument holds, disagree when it doesn't. That's respect. Blind agreement is useless. I don't need a congregation. I need an audience capable of thinking. You're responsible for what you believe because your beliefs eventually become actions. They determine how you vote, how you speak, whom you trust, whom you hate, what policies you support, what accusations you repeat, what institutions you defend, what rights you're willing to deny other people. False beliefs don't remain private forever. They enter public life. They become laws, movements, punishments, wars, riots, investigations, and damaged reputations. The emotional fast food newsroom may prepare the meal, but you decide whether to swallow it. This commercial is for the Shawn Armstrong book catalog. This is a body of work built across multiple lanes: military fiction, history, politics, economics, theology, paranormal research, martial arts, and veteran life. The point is simple. This is Shawn Armstrong's legacy to the world, the knowledge he's accrued through life and put on the page so others can use it. Shawn Armstrong's books cover several fronts. The catalog moves from war and military experience to history, political thought, economics, faith, paranormal investigation, and martial arts. That's not random. It's the product of a life spent studying conflict, institutions, human behavior, belief, discipline, and the strange ways people keep ruining and rebuilding everything. The military books are where service, fiction, and memory meet. The Ramadi trilogy follows an infantry platoon through one of the hardest cities in Iraq. The Iron Oath books turn military action into a fight over truth and accountability. The Second Battle of Ramadi gives readers a direct history of that fight, before the final salute takes the war home, where a veteran faces family, regret, and one final mission before the end. The history books are built around consequences. America is treated as a flawed but serious human project. Rome becomes a warning about ambition, institutional collapse, and the loss of Republican discipline. World War II becomes a global story, not just a greatest hits list of battles. The Federalist material reminds readers that consent, limits, and self-government are not decorative ideas. They're the load-bearing beams. The political and economic books are about systems. Understanding Capitalism explains property rights, prices, profit and loss, innovation, trade, and the moral case for free exchange. The Unmaking of the American Citizen argues that America has moved away from equal citizenship towards bureaucratic and identity-based management. The Bloodstained Banner takes on socialism and communism. Messiah critiques the Obama era. Together, these books are Shawn Armstrong's attempt to explain how ideas shape real life. Another major lane in the catalog is Faith and the Strange. The Passion series explores Jesus, Christian history, prophecy, the apostles, and theological tradition. Into the Beam walks through C.S. Lewis and Christian life. Whispers from Beyond takes paranormal investigation and evidence standards seriously. The demonology material goes into spiritual and supernatural claims with a serious framework instead of cheap theatrics. The martial arts lane is a major part of the catalog. Dragon Kempo 2.0 is presented as a structured curriculum with instructor guidance, belt manuals, self-defense, kata application, and practical training. It's built for function, teaching, discipline, and real-world movement. This is Shawn Armstrong's martial arts knowledge put into a form students and instructors can return to. The larger message is legacy. This catalog is what happens when life experience doesn't stay private. Military service becomes fiction, history, and veteran writing. Reading and argument become American history, Rome, World War II, politics, economics, and theology. Martial arts becomes curriculum, curiosity becomes method. Shawn Armstrong's knowledge is being put into books so other people can use it after the moment has passed. To start reading, scan the QR code and search Shawn Armstrong books on Amazon. Pick one lane or work through the catalog. Read the war fiction, read the history, read the politics, read the martial arts manuals, read the theology. The work is on the page. The legacy is there. Now the reader has to do the hard part and actually read. Let's bring this together. Modern political media increasingly sells emotional validation instead of verified information. The newsroom takes complicated issues and strips away context. It removes definitions. It shortens timelines. It selects the most emotional images. It chooses the most dramatic language. It reduces systems to villains. Then it presents the results as news. The audience accepts the product because the product feels good. It confirms anger. It confirms fear. It confirms identity. It confirms that the viewer is informed, decent, and surrounded by dangerous idiots. That's a powerful product. It's also intellectually corrosive. The audience then rewards the product. Clicks, views, subscriptions, donations, shares, comments, hate watching, brand loyalty. The networks study the reward and produce more. The audience becomes angrier. The networks become more extreme. Everybody blames everybody else. The machine keeps running. Then someone makes a claim. You ask for evidence. He tells you to Google it. The claim is supposedly public knowledge. Everybody's heard it. It's been reported everywhere. One item from a long list may be true. Therefore, the entire list becomes sacred text. Questioning any part of it becomes denial. Asking for sources becomes moving the goalposts. Remembering the original claim becomes unfair. This is where emotional media eventually leads. People know what they feel. They don't know what they can prove. The final responsibility belongs to the viewer. You can't control every newsroom. You can't control every algorithm. You can't prevent politicians from lying. You can't prevent creators from manipulating. You can't prevent strangers from posting garbage. You can control your standards. You can pause. You can read. You can check the source. You can examine the context. You can separate allegation from proof. You can admit uncertainty. You can correct yourself. You can refuse to reward dishonest content. This doesn't require political neutrality. I'm not politically neutral. You don't need to float above every issue pretending all arguments are equal. Some arguments are stronger. Some claims are false. Some policies are destructive. Some politicians are dishonest. Some institutions deserve severe criticism. But criticism without standards becomes propaganda. Conviction without evidence becomes fanaticism. Anger without discipline becomes manipulation. The goal isn't to feel nothing. The goal is to think before emotion takes command. The goal is to make your beliefs answer to evidence. The goal is to apply the same standard to people you support and people you oppose. The goal is to stop treating television personalities as intellectual foster parents. They're not raising you. They're retaining you. News should inform citizens. It shouldn't train customers. It should explain events. It shouldn't manufacture emotional dependence. It should investigate power. It shouldn't become the public relations department for one political tribe. It should correct mistakes. It shouldn't quietly rewrite yesterday's story and hope nobody saved the clip. But the media won't improve merely because we complain. The audience has to stop rewarding the worst behavior. Stop sharing stories you didn't read. Stop repeating accusations you can't support. Stop clicking headlines designed to make you furious. Stop treating every disagreement as proof of evil. Stop confusing familiarity with truth. Stop telling people to Google claims you made. Bring the evidence, own the argument. If you repeat a claim, you own it. Not the network, not the host, not the meme, not the algorithm, you. The news said it isn't a defense. My side believes it isn't evidence. Everybody knows isn't a source. It sounds true isn't verification. Go Google it isn't an argument. These are excuses for people who want the status of being informed without doing any of the work. The emotional fast food newsroom exists because too many people prefer the taste of validation to the discipline of truth. The networks know it. The politicians know it. The platforms know it. The advertisers know it. The only remaining question is whether you know it. This has been Shawn Thinking Out Loud. I'm Shawn Armstrong. Think for yourself, check the evidence, and stop letting people sell you outrage with a commercial break in the middle. The television can't make you stupid without your cooperation.